If someone goes back in time to murder their own grandfather, what happens? The logic is that if you go back in time and end your own bloodline before you're born, then you'll vanish. But if you vanish, then you can't be alive to go back in time and end your own bloodline, which is the so-called grandfather paradox. This paradox is tricky because it makes a bunch of assumptions about how a non-existent technology would work. We have no idea if time travel will ever be possible, and if it were, we have no idea that it will actually work this cleanly. My personal belief is that reversing time will never be possible, but for the sake of argument, I will accept that time travel is maybe doable. The first problem with this paradox is that nobody even tries to find an answer. They just say, oh, it won't happen because the universe won't let it happen, which is often called a narrative cop-out in fiction. It's an actual plot hole. Reality does not leave plot holes because it can't. So there has to be a real answer somewhere. I used my big autistic brain and said, we think of time loops like this as a circle, but what if they aren't? What if, when you go back in time, you're not actually in the past, you're just re-experiencing the past as it happened? Think about it like this. The grandfather paradox implies that time can exist as a circle, but if time only ever goes forward, then you can't actually alter the past. Time travel would be reintroducing elements of the past into the present. It would be like copy-pasting a piece of the timeline into the present moment. In this case, there would be no contradiction for the person who murders their own grandfather, so nothing would change. Here's another possibility. Let's say that when you time travel, you end up creating a branching path that deviates from the main timeline we all experience. It would be like a stream splitting off from a river, so there would still be no contradiction because you're not actually influencing the past at all. Either way, the past that created you would be unchanged since it already happened. No matter what you do to this transplanted past, it wouldn't change the past that led to you. It would be like two separate pasts. I believe the reason nobody has even considered this is because people view everything through a clean lens. The grandfather paradox is an example of how deeply narrative structures are ingrained into our brains. We view reality itself through these narrative structures and expect it to be clean enough to make sense, when it's very likely that the logic of reality is nowhere near that straightforward. If time travel were possible, the idea that we would be able to create an impossible time paradox that breaks reality is kind of ridiculous. Even if we can't predict how it would actually work just yet, there is no way that reality would allow a true paradox to exist. It could take 100 years, or maybe 1,000, to properly identify the mechanisms at play. But either way, the universe always has an answer.